Anna Carter stepped off the cold city bus just as the sun broke through the tall glass towers of downtown Chicago. She checked her reflection in the building's lobby window and smoothed the second-hand blazer her mother once wore for church. Her father, Thomas Carter, had worked as a janitor at Silverline Technologies for 15 years. She'd spent countless nights curled up in the break room, waiting for him to finish polishing endless marble floors. Growing up among humming servers and abandoned boardrooms gave her curiosity a home. She taught herself coding late at night on a discarded laptop someone left behind. Inside the massive lobby, she clutched her thin folder, careful not to wrinkle the corners of her single-page resume. Around her, sharp-suited applicants rehearsed answers into their phones and compared business cards. She pretended not to notice how different she looked, wearing scuffed shoes she'd polished with oil to hide the cracks. She sat on a stiff leather chair near the HR desk and whispered the names of coding languages under her breath to calm her heart. A receptionist finally called her name and pointed her toward a glass-walled conference room with cold metal chairs waiting inside. 3 managers sat behind a shiny table, each with a tablet and a polite, hollow smile. They asked where she studied and what internships she'd done. She said she hadn't gone to college yet, but showed them the simple apps she'd built for local businesses and her father's janitorial team. One manager leaned back, arms folded, tapping his pen when she mentioned teaching herself Python and SQL from old manuals and free videos. Another manager flipped through her pages so quickly she wondered if he'd read a single line. She felt her palms sweat against her skirt. They asked how she thought she'd survive here, surrounded by graduates from top universities with honors and big words. She told them bugs didn't care where you learned, only that you could fix them fast and right. She spoke about staying late in the empty building, watching programmers through glass doors, learning by copying scraps of code she'd seen on screens left unlocked. One of them checked his watch. Another said she seemed determined, but maybe she'd be better off gaining more experience. She thanked them anyway and gathered her folder as if it were worth gold. Back in the lobby, she sank onto a bench near the tall windows. Her reflection looked small under the polished marble pillars. She watched smart interns rush past with expensive laptops, laughing about weekend plans and high salaries. She pressed her father's spare work gloves deeper into her backpack and told herself not to cry. She reminded herself this wasn't the end, even if it stung like failure. She checked her phone, waiting for her father's shift to end so they could ride the bus home together. Her feet ached in her tight shoes, but she didn't dare slip them off. A door nearby slammed open, snapping her out of her quiet spiral. A frantic voice rose over the steady hum of the lobby. She shifted on the bench and caught pieces of the argument. Something about a system crash, missed deadlines, and a huge government contract on the line. Anna leaned forward. Through the frosted glass door left ajar, she spotted a huge digital screen covered in error logs, scrolling faster than she could read them. Men in suits hovered behind a tall figure, barking orders she recognized from whispered conversations. The CEO, Mr. Whitaker, famous for turning small fires into big storms. Anna's breath quickened. She clutched her folder to her chest and debated leaving right then. But her feet didn't move. She remembered the nights she'd sat by the server rooms, copying error messages into her old notebook when her father wasn't looking. She knew the shapes of certain bugs like old neighbors she'd bumped into again and again. Her hands tingled as she mouthed lines of code under her breath. She didn't belong there, yet something told her she couldn't just sit still. She slipped off the bench and stepped closer to the door. Inside, the CEO barked questions no one could answer. Senior engineers shifted uncomfortably, muttering that they needed more time. One woman suggested rolling back the patch, but Whitaker shot her down with a wave of his hand. The words all blurred together, but Anna focused on the giant screen and the error loop blinking like a beacon. She recognized the way the variables tangled and knew a fix, risky but possible. Her heartbeat thumped in her ears as she pressed her fingertips against the door. She thought about her father's tired face whenever he reminded her to believe in herself. Before she could lose her nerve, she nudged the door wider and slipped through the gap. Heads turned, voices dipped. She cleared her throat and spoke up, her words shaky but clear. She said she had an idea. A young engineer blinked at her, confused. Someone asked who she was. Whitaker, half amused and half annoyed, raised an eyebrow, ready to dismiss her. But Anna didn't back away. She met the CEO's stare and told him she could see the bug. If he gave her 2 minutes, she could prove it. Silence clung to the room. The next breath might change everything. No one moved for a moment, as Anna's words hung in the room, like a question no one had dared to ask. Mr. Whitaker narrowed his eyes, studying her like she was either the biggest joke in the building or the only spark left. A senior engineer cleared his throat, ready to escort her out, but Whitaker lifted a hand to stop him. He pointed to an empty station at the side table and told her she had exactly 2 minutes. Anna's heart slammed against her ribs as she stepped forward, clutching her folder so tight it crumpled at the edges. She dropped her folder on the side table, pulled out her old flash drive, and connected it to the terminal. The engineers leaned in, curious despite themselves, while Whitaker watched with arms folded. Anna's fingers danced over the keys faster than her thoughts could keep up. She muttered to herself, eyes flicking between the giant error screen and her own lines of code. She found the loop, isolated the tangled piece, and wrote a patch on the fly. Someone behind her scoffed under his breath, but she ignored him, fixing variable names she knew were the root of the crash. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her how he used to say that floors stay clean, only if you know where the hidden dirt is. Code felt the same. She whispered that to herself as she ran a test, fingers trembling while the lines compiled. The main screen flickered, the red errors slowed, then vanished row by row until only a clean green log remained. The room fell so quiet she heard someone exhale in disbelief. Anna leaned back from the terminal, her pulse roaring in her ears, refusing to believe it herself until the senior engineer stepped closer. He tapped a few keys, scrolled through her patch, then turned to the CEO and said it worked. Whitaker's lips curled into a grin, sharp and surprised at once. He asked her name again. She told him. Her voice didn't shake this time. He asked where she learned it. She said here, in this building, while waiting for her father to finish cleaning offices everyone else forgot. One of the engineers laughed softly, shaking his head like he couldn't believe the janitor's daughter just saved a deal worth millions while they argued over fancy certifications and degrees. Anna glanced toward the open door and saw her father standing there with his mop bucket beside him, staring at her with wide eyes and a half-finished smile. He looked like he couldn't decide whether to cry or run to her. She mouthed that it was okay, that she was okay, and then Whitaker's voice cut back in. He stepped closer, extended his hand, and told her she'd never have to sit in that waiting lobby again. He offered her a real job, not the junior position she'd been rejected for, but a developer slot right there on the main team. He asked when she could start. She looked at her father and then back at the CEO. She wanted to say she needed to think, but she knew there was nothing to think about. She said she could start tomorrow if they wanted. Whitaker clapped a hand on her shoulder and told the engineers to make sure she had everything she needed. The people who had once barely looked up at her now leaned in to see her notes, asking what tools she'd used, what tricks she knew that they'd missed. She gave them the answers without arrogance, her father's pride warm behind her. Her father stepped inside at last, ignoring the stares. He wrapped an arm around her shoulder, careful not to crush her. He told Whitaker his daughter had always been this smart, they just hadn't seen it yet. Whitaker nodded like he understood, but deep down, even he knew he'd almost let gold slip through cheap glass doors. Anna gathered her crumpled folder and her old flash drive, now worth more than she'd ever dreamed. She walked with her father past the same lobby chairs where she'd sat invisible just an hour ago. The same polished floors her father had mopped for years. Outside the big glass doors, the city looked different to her eyes. She stood beside her father at the bus stop, clutching her backpack to her chest. Tomorrow, she'd walk back into that building, not as the janitor's daughter waiting for rejection, but as the one who fixed what no one else could see. Her father asked if she was ready. She nodded, a grin spreading across her face. For the first time, she felt like the shiny towers didn't tower over her at all. She'd found her place inside them with her father right beside her.